Action groups have called for 80 amendments to the Defective Concrete Block scheme, which is back before the Dáil next week. Now, every time we cover this topic, listeners get in touch asking us, why is the state footing the bill for all of this? And with 2 more counties now admitted to the scheme, is that bill set to balloon? Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Martina Cleary of the Clare Pyrite Action Group, and I began by asking her how extensive this problem is in County Clare.
In County Clare, we've over 1,025 houses that I know of with confirmed or potential 17 housing estates, 5 local authority housing estates, and 11 larger scale public or private buildings. It's throughout the county.
And it dates back to the 1970s?
Yeah, well, I conducted, I'm a researcher, and I conducted surveys, quite detailed surveys amongst our membership, and the earliest we have a house from 1970. The houses go from 1970 up to 2013. 89 was particularly bad. If you look at 2006, particularly bad as well.
So we are potentially looking at a much, much wider problem.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Obviously now this is saying that the supplier source is impacting County Clare, Limerick and Tipperary for sure. But unfortunately, we know that not only is it in Mayo, it's in Sligo. There's a number of 100 houses there that are impacted. They've been waiting a long time to get acknowledgement of that. And then we've heard as well from certain engineers that it's running all along the East Coast as well. At the subcommittee, or the Joint Office Committee there last week on the 23rd of June, 13 counties were noted. That was the number so far, but it's suspected it's spreading.
Now, your own house was built in 1995, Martina, and you're the second owner, so you can't be sure where the bricks in your house came from. But if your house was to be rebuilt in the morning, would the redress scheme that has now been proposed, would that allow for that?
Well, now, I suppose to get out people there in the general public, the idea of 100% redress, it doesn't exist in the new scheme, and people are hearing this, 420,000 euros. People have to understand that nobody will get 420,000 euros. That is an upper limit, and that also includes as well, what we're talking about here is the calculation on the square metre, the imprint of your house. And the calculations that have been done so far by SCSI is based on a particular, calculation. It's 161 euros per square metre, and that's based on the Northwest region. We don't even have calculations yet made for Limerick and Clare. And what that works out at, if you calculate that, it depends on the size of your house. So the smaller houses are coming in. I believe the example was cited many times now over the last week of a house, Martina Hegarty's house in Mayo was taken as a sample. It's a very small bungalow, and mine would be around the same size as well. And, based on the calculation, she'd get about 158,000, 160,000. That's for small bungalows. It's nowhere near 420,000. That would only be for the really, really big houses that would get anywhere near that, and only if you get a demolition. And whatever the size of your house, if the calculations are coming out now, you're looking at 40, 50, 60,000 shortfall, based on that.
In your own personal situation, you first noticed a problem in your house 3 years ago, is it?
Yeah, I suppose it started in 2019, and it was misdiagnosed by the engineers, and it was only when I'd invested at that stage about 6,000 euros in fixing something that wasn't the problem. And we got to, the render, like just repatching the render because it was cracking, and they got past that they found the block was disintegrating. And that's the other issue, I suppose, with the pyrite. It can be a very, very long-term slow rot, and the manifest cracking, it starts on the weather-facing walls and elevations, but it's not as exploding or dramatic as perhaps we're seeing with the mica blocks. But then you have to take into account that those houses have been left to degenerate already for a decade. So we're very fearful, I suppose, in the mica counties that we'll be disqualified, or we're going to be left pushed out on the long finger.
And you mean in the pyrite counties?
In the pyrite counties, yeah. But you see, when you look at pyrite houses as well, and this is the big danger, it mightn't look as bad as what you're seeing, let's say from the mica. And people are saying, sure, my house isn't as bad yet. However, when you core test, my house has been core tested, the block is black, it's disintegrating, it's dust, it's rubble inside renders. It isn't bursting open necessarily, but what it means is the block is losing its compressive strength, and your structural strength of your house is in actually dangerous condition, and you don't know because you're looking at it kind of cosmetically from the outside. And what we really fear now with this new damage threshold and building assessment that it's just going to be looking at it visually, they're taking away access to, number one, an independent engineer that's working on your behalf, and number two, access to core testing. So it's kind of like a cosmetic analysis of what things look like without scientific foundation. It's very worrying.
You believe these suppliers need to be part of the remediation conversation?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know, I think the whole narrative around this falling back on the taxpayer, I'm a taxpayer, so is everybody else who's impacted. I've paid for my house, I'm paying for my house, I'm paying for a mortgage. Why would I, as a taxpayer, pay for it a second time? Why would the state not be pursuing, if any company is producing or has produced materials with such an impact, defective materials, that's causing such a financial impact, not only on families and communities, but on the state, why would they not be going after them? Absolutely, to retrieve and recoup the damage.
And that indeed is a very good question, Roisin Shortall.
Absolutely. And I mean, the bill for this is going to be enormous. And you know,
the scale of it even.
Sure.
If it's from 1970 to 2013.
And it seems no lessons were learned from the earlier pyrite issue that broke there a number of years ago. Look, this gets back to the whole question of light touch regulation and the lack of enforcement in relation to any standards at all. My own colleague, Cian O'Callaghan, drew attention during the week to concerns about the National Building Control Office, which was set up last year, and it has a very small budget. It's reported as having a staff of only 4 people, right, for the whole country. And there's over 1,000 quarries. And of course the government should be, vigorously pursuing the quarries and the
We're
suppliers.
Not even asking for an inquiry into the... Why is there not more calls for an inquiry? We're going to spend billions and billions of taxpayers' money, and we don't even know who had responsibility for ensuring this didn't happen.
But again, it gets down to the lack of proper regulation in this area. But the government has to ensure that the construction industry, and particularly the quarries, make a substantial contribution to the resolution of this issue.
It's also very important to emphasise that there are many of us that are calling both for an inquiry and for industry to be brought to the table to make a financial contribution. And one of the 80 amendments that have been tabled by the homeowners, and many of us, myself and Cian O'Callaghan and others have tabled those, deals precisely with the need for inquiry and industry contribution. But what's really scandalous about this bill is, despite the length and complexity, despite the enormous price tag, we're being given just 2 hours on Wednesday to go through the detail of the bill, to deal with all of those amendments and trying to get it right. And the homeowners, in a statement they issued on Thursday, were very, very clear. If this bill isn't amended, they won't support it. They have said that black and white in their own statement.
And they have 80 amendments.
And they have tabled the amendments. They emailed them to every single TD from the affected counties and in the Oireachtas Housing Committee. But here's the crucial thing. 3 things in this bill that absolutely have to change. The damage threshold, as Martina Cleary mentioned, has to change and cannot exclude people who've damaged homes. The cost underpinnings, which are now out of date, have to be revised and improved before the scheme opens. And crucially, because in Martina Cleary and Martina Hegarty's case, they've appealed to government to allow them to take whatever grant they get and build a smaller house within the footprint without any penalty. If this legislation goes through as it stands, they would get less of a grant if they downsize. That was an enormous compromise that the homeowners put on the table. They call it no penalty downsizing. And the idea that not only would that not be in there, but you would penalise them for accepting the fact that they're not getting 100% redress is scandalous. There are many other issues, but the crucial thing is Darragh O'Brien has to give us more time on Wednesday to go through all of this. And there will be a vote on order of business on Tuesday, and people will be watching how people vote on that.
2 hours to scrutinise and sign off on something that's going to cost taxpayers 3 billion, maybe more billion, before we know.
24 million euros a minute of that time.
Minister O'Brien has engaged extensively on this, and I think out of that engagement we have the removal of the upfront cost, the exemption from planning on like-for-like basis, the delivery of the 100% grant right up to the cap of 420,000. I think these are all important, and I think from government's perspective we do need to move with the legislation. We do need to start getting schemes in 2022. I think that's critically important.
But this scheme won't open until 2023. Give us 9 hours of committee time on Wednesday. Our committee will meet non-stop to go through this. It won't delay the passage of the legislation. Let us do our job as legislators, Malcolm.
Just in relation to the points around point, the Minister Bryan has committed as well to appointing a senior counsel to consider the issue of pursuing wrongdoers in relation to this. I think that's important. And I do think as well that the NSAI have been tasked with looking at the consideration of other potentially deleterious materials around, such as pyrite. So there are other elements
we
to
were
this.
told in committee that's not going to be complete until the end of next year, a year after the scheme
Okay,
opens.
just a very basic question is, there was an allegation that defective blocks are still being sold. Now, why can we not establish whether that's the case or not? I mean, that's just unforgivable.
Minister?
Again, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break.